The changing of the guard was almost over. Tourists crowded behind the iron gates, phones lifted like torches, their lenses hungry for tradition. Somewhere between the flutter of Union Jacks and the rhythmic cadence of military boots on cobblestone, a stillness hung in the air, a silence that always made the moment feel sacred. Then it happened. An elderly man stepped forward. He wasn't part of the ceremony. His blazer was faded. His medals, a modest row of four, glinted dull bronze in the morning sun. He moved slowly, deliberately, leaning on a wooden cane that clicked softly with each step. The crowd parted instinctively, more curious than alarmed. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't loud. But he was heading straight for Royal Guard Post 4, and straight for Sergeant Callum Ward. And Callum Ward did not move. His grip on the rifle tightened, white gloves creaking at the seams. The old man stopped just 2 feet in front of him. No words. Just silence. A moment suspended in time. Then, slam! The steel butt of the rifle cracked down onto the pavement with military precision. A warning. The crowd gasped. Some laughed nervously, unsure if it was part of the show. Others stepped back. A little girl clutched her mother's coat. Phones now filmed not for memory, but for something more primal, conflict. The old man didn't flinch. His cloudy eyes stared forward, not at the man, but at the hat badge on his bearskin. He whispered something, barely audible. Callum didn't move. He was trained not to speak. Not to react. Not to break the line. But something about the old man's stillness, it wasn't defiance. It was weight. As if this spot, this ground, meant more to him than anyone could understand. The sergeant's jaw tightened. He'd stared down tourists, pranksters, even belligerents before. But this felt different. Why did this feel different? Still standing. Still silent. Still gripping the rifle like it was the last anchor to a stormy past. Sergeant Callum Ward had always been the perfect soldier. Recruited at 18. Deployed by 20. Decorated by 23. He didn't come from privilege. No royal connections. Just a council flat in East London, a mother who cleaned offices at night, and a father who never made it home from Afghanistan. His only inheritance was discipline and pain. But Callum wore both well. Steel in his spine. Storm in his eyes. Boot camp had broken many. But not him. The yelling, the sleep deprivation, the punishments, they didn't crack him. Because he was already cracked. War just gave those cracks direction. Helmand Province, Basra, Sanjin, places stitched into his skin like invisible tattoos. He remembered one night in particular, his platoon ambushed on patrol. The firefight lasted 43 minutes. They lost 2 men. One of them bled out in Callum's arms. A friend. A brother. Private Jamie Kent. Jamie had wanted to be a poet. Wrote verses on scraps of MRE packaging, folded them like prayers. His last words weren't dramatic. Just, tell my mum I wasn't scared. Callum never told her. Because the silence felt more sacred than any lie. That guilt became a ritual. Each morning, he'd polish his boots until his reflection stared back, judging. Each patrol, he walked 1 step sharper than needed, repenting. When his tour ended, he came home, but the war didn't. It followed him into pubs, into dreams, into quiet rooms where the air felt too loud. So he re-enlisted, not into combat, but into ceremony. The Queen's Guard. To the public, it was tradition. Pageantry. Something to film and post with filters. To Callum, it was something else. It was silence he could control. Standing still, saying nothing, being immovable, it was therapy. A daily ritual of absolute control in a world that made no sense. Until today. Until the man with the cane and the medals. The old man hadn't moved. Neither had Callum. But something was shifting, inside. Callum's eyes, trained not to focus, now flickered. Just for a moment. A glance, not at the face, but at the row of medals. Faded. Earned. And suddenly, a ghost stirred. The first medal was unmistakable, the Distinguished Conduct Medal. A rarity. Second only to the Victoria Cross. The kind of medal that wasn't awarded. It was survived. Callum felt his throat tighten. His heartbeat didn't race, it thudded with memory. Who was this man? Why now? Why here? The standoff had stretched longer than expected. Way longer. Still, neither man moved. Two statues. One young. One aging. But both carved from something deeper than marble. Tourists had turned into spectators. Spectators had turned into witnesses. And now, a line had been crossed, an invisible line the public didn't quite understand, but felt. A woman near the front whispered, "He's not supposed to be there, right?" A father hoisted his son onto his shoulders, murmuring, "Something's wrong." And the girl clutching her mother earlier? She was crying now. Phones were recording, not for novelty now, but for justice. Then, a voice. Sharp. Official. Uniformed. "Sir. Step back at once." The old man blinked, slowly. The first break in his stillness. Corporal Darren Rees, one of the palace marshals, was cutting through the crowd like a man slicing water. His uniform was less ceremonial, more managerial. Clipboard in hand, earpiece buzzing, his tone all bark, no heart. He didn't recognize the man. Didn't care. "Sir, this is restricted space. You cannot stand there. Step behind the line immediately." The veteran lifted his cane a little, then gently set it down again. No resistance. No aggression. Just presence. Callum didn't flinch. Still hadn't spoken. Corporal Rees shifted his gaze, now addressing Callum. "Sergeant Ward. Resume post. Remove this man from your path." Callum's eyes didn't leave the medals. Still silent. "That's an order." A beat of hesitation. A storm now gathered in the air, tension thick enough to chew. Somewhere in the crowd, a man shouted, "Oi, leave him be. That man's a vet." Another? "He's wearing medals, for God's sake." The public didn't know protocol, but they knew respect when they saw it. The energy was changing, unity forming from confusion. Still, the corporal stepped forward, fuming. "Sergeant, remove this man or I will initiate disciplinary." Then Callum spoke. Not loud. Not angry. But sharp. Like a blade drawn quietly. "What's his name?" Rees paused. "What?" "If you're ordering me to move him, you should know his name." The corporal blinked. "I don't. What does that have to do with?" "That's the Distinguished Conduct Medal on his chest. We don't move men like that without knowing who the hell they are." The crowd erupted in soft applause. Murmurs of approval spread like fire through dry grass. The corporal, now flushed and visibly unsure, turned to the old man. "Sir, your name?" The man finally spoke. His voice was weathered, sandpaper rough, but dignified. "Captain Leonard Ainsworth. 3rd Battalion. 1967 to 1981. Silence followed. The name meant nothing to the crowd. But Callum recognized it. Not from books. Not from documentaries. But from the stories passed down from older soldiers, the kind whispered in tents, in pubs, in moments where soldiers let their guard down. Captain Ainsworth, the man who led his squad through an ambush in Belfast, losing half his team but saving 12 civilians. The man who disappeared from the public eye, refusing interviews, honors, even reunions. A ghost of valor. And now, standing in front of Callum. The eyes of the trained soldier shifted from unmovable steel to something softer. Recognition. Gratitude. a silent salute from one life-scarred warrior to another. He stepped aside. One boot moved. Then the next. The line broken. Protocol shattered. The public gasped. But then, they cheered. Not because a rule was broken, but because a man had been seen. Captain Ainsworth nodded once, never losing his poise, and continued walking. He didn't need to say thank you. The medal said enough. The crowd had quieted again, but the silence this time was reverent. Captain Ainsworth didn't walk far. Just a few steps past the post. He paused at the center of the forecourt, where guards traditionally perform the final pivot of the ceremonial handover. He turned. Facing Sergeant Callum Ward. Their eyes met across a short distance, but carried decades of pain, pride, and the quiet ache only soldiers understand. Ainsworth raised his right hand, not in salute, but in a quiet, private gesture. He touched his medals with trembling fingers. Then, softly, "One of these was for a young lad I didn't save." Callum blinked. The word struck him deeper than expected. He stepped forward, just one pace, carefully, respectfully, his polished boots clicking against the courtyard stones like punctuation marks in history. "Mine too." Ainsworth gave a faint nod, an acknowledgement of shared ghosts. Callum looked down for a moment, then spoke again, this time, not as a guard, not as a soldier, but as a man caught in the crosshairs of grief and gratitude. "I lost a brother in Sanjin. Jamie Kent. He wrote poems. Thought the war wouldn't take him. He bled out in my arms. I never told his mum." His voice cracked, just slightly, but enough. Ainsworth took a single step forward. The crowd watched, still, breathless. "You never forget their names. You just carry them quieter." Callum nodded. "You came here for him?" Ainsworth looked up at the balcony of the palace, high above them. "No. For all of them. The forgotten ones. I served 30 years, but they only ever mentioned battles. Not brothers." He glanced toward the gathering of tourists. Many had lowered their phones now. Some wiped tears. Others simply watched, uncertain of what they were witnessing but aware it was not ordinary. They turn our pain into pageantry. But this place, this spot, it meant something real, once. Before the crowds. Before the cameras. Callum looked up at the towering stone pillars of Buckingham Palace. He'd spent so many hours standing here. Days. Months. Never moved. Never blinked. But in this moment, his body relaxed, not out of fatigue, but release. "They train us to stand still through anything," he said quietly. "Even when it's killing us." A beat of silence. Then Captain Ainsworth spoke, this time loud enough for all to hear. "But today, you moved. And that's what will save you." A ripple of quiet emotion surged through the watching crowd. Not a cheer. Not applause. Just silence. Respectful. Earned. A moment untouched by spectacle. Callum took one final step closer, and did something he had never done in uniform. He extended his hand. Captain Ainsworth looked at it for a long beat, then took it. A firm grip. Soldier to soldier. Man to man. Wounded to wounded. It wasn't protocol. It was healing. Callum sat alone on the edge of the cot in his quarters. The ceremonial helmet rested on his lap. The white gloves folded beside him. His hands bare. Human. He stared at the floor, still processing what had happened. The crowd. The breach. The connection. The medal. A knock at the door. It opened slightly, revealing Corporal Reese, not barking this time, but hesitant. "That's a man. Captain Ainsworth. His record checked out." "I didn't know." Callum didn't look up. Most don't. Reese shifted awkwardly, then placed something on the table, a printed photo. A still frame from one of the tourist videos. It showed the exact moment Callum and the captain shook hands. "It's going viral," Rees said quietly. The caption reads, "When protocol meets humanity." Callum exhaled. For once, he didn't feel like a statue. Or a relic. Or a ghost. He felt seen. New shift. New ceremony. New tourists. But Sergeant Callum Ward stood a little different today. His back was just as straight. His eyes just as forward. But his silence carried meaning now. And above his left glove, where the crease of his sleeve fell, just barely visible, was a tiny, folded piece of laminated paper. A verse from Jamie Kent's poem. Found and kept all these years. Steel holds the body, but silence holds the soul. And when we move, we heal the whole. They say royal guards never move. But what if movement is what makes a man whole again? Would you have done the same?